Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice that you are all here. Welcome to UKS. My name is Miriam Wistrich. I'm the director of UKS, and I'm here with Danae and Stathis Gourgouris, who have graced us with their presence and come in from afar, which is really wonderful. Danae is one of the participating artists in Open Systems, the exhibition we're sitting in right now. And Danae has two works in this exhibition, Sprouts of a Dragon's Teeth, which is a 9-minute short film, which you can see down here, and which will play until we close today. So if you haven't seen it already, you can go have a look. And then these three sculptures, SAA, SAE, and SAH.
E.
Sorry. A, E, and H, no?
A-N-E, but it's
sorry, it's Greek letters.
It's Greek letters.
Yeah,
sorry.
Apologies, my apologies.
Correction.
I'll just very briefly introduce you, Danae. You're an artist. You work with video, sound, sculpture, and text. And often you examine language as an active agent in the systematizing and codifying of socio-political infrastructures.
To simplify that.
Yeah. And you're here with your long-term collaborator, Stathis. And Stathis, you are a poet, essayist, translator, and sound artist, and a professor of comparative literature and society at Columbia University. It's so great that you're here. We're going to talk today in this sort of short talk about your work in this exhibition, your work together, and then you have some writing that you're going to share with us. And I've been told to say that questions from the audience are welcome at all times, so you can just let us know if there's something you'd like to ask. So maybe, Danae, you want to just start by telling us both about the work we're looking at and the other work in the exhibition, but maybe also about this body of research or the body of work that they form part of.
Yeah, I have to see how to condense it. Both works come from kind of the same research body, which I guess I'm also naming Sprouts of a Dragon's Teeth, because why not? And all of the works are kind of framed by the myth of Cadmus and are looking into the way the nation is instituted, but also the way they're slightly different. So this work is more connected to writing as a form and to bureaucratic structures, and the work downstairs, which is the one we've been working with, Stathis, is just like kind of a part of a series of short films that again look at Thebes, which is a city outside of Athens, an hour outside of Athens, which has been for a long time used as kind of a projection space for Athenian politics to take place in within Athenian tragedy, like Antigone or Oedipus Rex. Even Seven Against Thebes takes place there. There's a lot of the Bacchae.
Maybe you want to tell us, for those of us who aren't like that in the know of Greek mythology, maybe just refresh our memory of the myth of Cadmus.
Yeah, so Cadmus is the son of a Phoenician king, and he's leaving Phoenicia because he's looking for his sister, who is Europe, and is crossing and going to the Oracle of Delphi to ask what to do, how to find her. And he's been told to abandon the search and instead just go and found a new city-state by following a cow and see where the cow gets exhausted, and that's where the institution of the new city-state should be. So that is actually what Thebes. Well, actually, that is what Thebes becomes in the myth. That's what he's instituting is Thebes, and in the process he has to kill a dragon and put his teeth into the soil, and armed men spring up from the soil, and they start to kill each other. He throws a stone, and then the people who survive the killing are the first Thebaeans, like autochthonous Thebaeans. And the reason I'm interested in this myth is because it connects this act of founding to an act of violence that perpetuates itself. And that's my interest also in the nation state as a form, something that for which the violence is essential in its institution. Also, Cadmus is meant to have like brought the phonetic alphabet to Greece, where consonants and vowels are coming together as a system, which is kind of more what this work is looking at.
And perhaps you can say a little bit more, because Thebes plays this super central role both in the films, but also in, I think, what you're going to read for us later. So maybe could you say a little bit more to explain to us a little bit more why Thebes is such an important place to think with and through?
So my initial interest comes from the myth and then how it's been used as kind of the other to the ideal city-state. And then in relation to its more contemporary histories, where there's a lot of layers of migration to the city from like Asia Minor, and then from people coming from all around Greece to work at its industries, because in the 70s it had a kind of it became an industrial hub, and there were a lot of like textile factories and pipe factories, electrical, a lot of different kinds, and its population increased drastically. And then around end of 80s, 90s, it started decreasing again when the factories were closing, defaulting. And there's also layers of migration in the 90s and more contemporary. There's even a detention center placed there. So I'm interested in asking the question, what does it mean to be from somewhere in a place where it's hard to tell who is from there, and in many layers, I guess.
And the works, I think, often they speak about these things quite indirectly, I think, and with a kind of high degree of abstraction.
Yes, very high.
Very, very high. And these three are quite a good example of that, aren't they?
Very high degree of abstraction here.
But maybe you want to tell us a little bit about the form, or what we're looking at.
Well, the form of the sculptures is referencing this disused public displays that are in Athens in very, very central Athens. That used to have posters in them, and actually they used to have some kind of glass vitrines that in front. And then the papers are kind of tracings of archival material that I've collected from the Thebes municipal archive, and you're kind of collaged in some way, and yeah.
Because you seem to be drawn often to these kind of more infrastructural items, like items that kind of hold other things or are hosts to other things, but not necessarily the things themselves.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess I'm just, there's a level, that's also why I'm interested in poetics and in myth, because there's a level of distance that allows for different kind of relations to exist, but also allows maybe for the thing that is looking at to be focused on Frit's absence, as we kind of talked about before.
So we're going to return to some of these like key concepts for
Yes.
both of you, but maybe before we go there, I just thought it would be, I'm very curious to hear how you two came to work together.
Well, this is my turn now. Okay. Then I came to me. So I'll let her tell the story of how that happened. But I knew her since she was a child, basically, because her mother is a childhood friend of mine. This has nothing to do with our collaboration, but it was just something that was, in fact, emerged when she came to me with this idea. I always thought her work and whatever she was doing was great. I was very excited to be part of it, and I understood instantly what she had in mind. And from that point on, it really was a collaboration in the sense that I was supposed to write this text for this visual material, but really in the process, we were thinking the whole project constantly. And I love situations where I'm put in I'm kind of called upon to do something that I'm not planning. It's always, for me, very exciting, creatively. So that's exactly what happened. She came with a project, said, I'm doing this, and I want you to be part of it. So, perfect. So I wrote these texts responding. I started by responding to the visual material, and then they kind of continued from there. I told her she.
Primarily the film in the beginning?
Yes, the footage. There's quite considerable amount of footage, and in the raw form. And the thing is that the texts are sort of generated. I do 100 million things, so I'm not really always paying attention. But they're generated in the process. I just wrote one, in fact, a couple of days ago, which you had not seen, and we'll read it later. Because this is really a beautiful, it's a real resource what she's created, this framework, to think metaphorically about this place and its history and what it might mean. So,
I'm just going to add that basically I came across Stathis's work online through my research, and I was really interested in it. I read his book, and then I was just speaking to my mum on the phone, telling her what I was doing, and I was like, "Oh, I'm reading this book by Stathis Gourgouris. It's so good." Da, da, da. And she was like, "You know that Stathis is our childhood friend, right? We're from the same, it's from Alexei, the same town." I was like, "No," and I understood that. Actually know his son, and that we're family, we're related, and all these things. And then I went to Stathis. I was like, yeah, but it came first through the research, then understanding that there's a pre-existing connection that I wasn't aware of.
And what did you have in mind when you contacted him?
I really didn't know what I had in mind. I had this framework about Thebes, and I kept going back and filming more, and every time I would be there and writing and filming, but I didn't know. I knew that I wanted to make a film, but I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to make, like what was holding it together.
yeah.
So it was. I was sending to Stathis shots that I was shooting, like clips of things, and then we would talk about it, and then we'd see what kind of themes emerge from the shots, and then he would write something, and then I would send something else. So it was very unformed.
Which was really wonderful, actually, for me. I didn't, and because the whole I was part of the whole process of forming. But I'm not worried about, and I told her from the beginning, of things unformed. I mean, I think that's the creative process is such that there's never something ever unformed. I mean, basically, this is the point. She was presenting material that had form already, and she was asking herself, and through me in some ways also, what to do with these things, how to form these things in a different way. And this was really a fun conversation. In many ways, our conversations are not recorded, that they were extensive, and ideas emerged from both of us simultaneously, and that could be material for all kinds of other stuff, actually. So it was very exciting for me. I mean, not because I knew her and I really respect her talent and all that, but it just gives me an opportunity to think creatively about these things through film, which was also for me very provocative. Yeah.
And do you think, Stathis, that the things that resonate with you in the project and in the work are different from what resonates with Danae, or are you very much on the same
I would say
page?
I think we're on the same page. I don't think it's different. I mean, part of it is we discussed this earlier. I mean, though we're from obviously different generations, we both of us have already had a similar attitude about certain things that have to do with national myths or, the Greek ideal, and our politics also converges. That's independently before we met. So it was a sort of instant familiarity, though we had not pre-discussed it. It didn't take us that long to get into the heart of it, even though, yes, we didn't know quite where it would go, and that in a way didn't really matter. And of course, it's really a nice film, and so I always told her, you just do whatever you want with it. I mean, and whatever I write, you do whatever you want with it. That's perfectly fine with me. Actually.
I mean, even in the film, the fragment I end up using was actually a part of a larger thing
which
that
I will read,
that Stathis wrote, and then I was like, I want this bit, and used that. So there was a lot of exchange and decisions made between us.
Is now a good time to hear?
Yeah, we can do that.
Text?
We can do that. Yeah.
My poems are very small, but that's fine. Found vowels. He's shifting through seeds on his palm. Each seed is made out of enamel and resists cracking. He lays them out on a makeshift grid carved on the ground, a series of parallel lines meeting perpendicular ones. The grid has 4 columns and 7 rows. He organizes the seeds according to size, then according to weight, then according to sound, the sound that each makes when dropped to the soil. A subtle yet present sound. 2 enclosures of the grid are always left blank. Another 2 are occupied by a comma in one and a dot on the remaining cell. With each ordering, the soil swallows them deeper. I'll read another one. 3,000 earthquakes. I read this morning that over 3,000 earthquakes have happened in the last 2 years in the area. Studies of the plain haven't concluded on the source of the seismic activity. It's not clear whether it is caused by a need to expel, to submerge, or to alter.
So I will read the first of these, which was also used in the film, and we together translated as native stones. They say that once upon a time, natives were many, but now there are none. Another side of the story suggests the earth opened up and swallowed them. Exactly like once before, it spat them out into the center of the world. Besides, earthquakes are happening daily in Thebes. Earth chasms open up and everyone gets lost in them. Others say that from the depths of Thebes sprout foreigners, passing pilgrims who carry their place inside them. Even when they lose their way, they find somewhere to ground their touch. Then they look around, and with their eyes shape familiar horizons. And there, they breathe. Strange how many people find their oxygen in breathless spaces. They filter the polluted air, centuries of carbon and magnesium, ancient quarries of manifold earthstone. It's difficult to tell what is carved by humans and what by time. Assorted ruins. Whoever thought of nature as a production engine of ruins? And yet, time never showed mercy on anyone. But time has loved the space dimension from the outset. And so, Thebes remains Thebes, with all the refuse of existence exclusively its own. Lichen the scattering of marble stones. What lives until when, what in this abandoned there touch? In the end, horses remain and roam free in fallow earth, wandering amidst the solar panels. From the standpoint of astral light, the scattered and the assorted is indivisible. Perhaps in black and white font over some canvas that moves not in the rhythms of life, but motion pictures. In this film, where no stars find a spot, every ray of light deposits folds of the universe. And if lichen turns rays into morning hue, and if the horses get hot under their manes, the lustrous metal forests that sprout in the last 10 years translate each ray, fold by fold, to electricity exported to Germany. Thebes has always been a passage. On its crossroads, patricides took hold and later turned into plagues. The ground was polluted by unburied oracles of killing kin. In underground tunnels that still wanders the ghost of Anti-Nymphi, who claimed the customs of the gods in order to escape from the settling of accounts. A genuine false step imprint of native affliction. Nowadays, high voltage wires signal paths of migratory miscegenation. If I were a migratory bird flying at such heights, I would hear the high-pitched frequencies of current in perfect sonic detail. You would hear the syncopated cut of my wings like electric guitar feedback in midair. The ancients would hear the sound of the infinite inside their caves. Nowadays, the nomads from the east stay up all night to the sound of belly dancing flowing from inside the rusty pickup trucks. Thebes has always been a passage. Here, millions of all-resourceful travelers distinguish themselves, and only the stones can be considered native. It makes you wonder.
Τι γεννιέται από το έδαφος. Οι πέτρες καίνε τον Ιούλιο και μαζί καίνε τα μάτια μου. Στην πεδιάδα της Θήβας, ο ήλιος καίει το ανίποτο, το μεταφράζει σε υδρότα. Αρδενίτης, κάδμιο, χρώμιο, χαλκός, μετατρέπονται σε εξασθενές χρώμιο. Το εξασθενές χρώμιο κινείται σε υπόγεια νερά, νοθεύοντάς τα. Υπόγεια ρεύματα το μεταβολίζουν σε φρούτα, πατάτες, κρεμμύδια, οξύ σε μαρμάρινα θράψματα, εκάβματα στο δέρμα. Η μόλυνση είναι εν μέρει εγγενής, εν μέρει απόρρια ανθρωπογενών δραστηριοτήτων, εν μέρει βιομηχανικής ρύπανσης. Στις βάκχες του Σονίκα, ο Διόνυσος εκμυστηρεύτηκε. Η Θήβα με μολύνει με την οθεία της. Μετατρέπομαι σε έναν ξένο, σε κάποια έτερη απόρρια της συνήθης τυραννίας της. Ο μεταβολισμός της πεδιάδας αντιδρά σε ό,τι αντιστέκεται στην οθεία. What is born out of the soil? The stones are burning in July, and with them my eyes are burning too. In Thebes' plain, the sun is burning the unspoken. It translates it into sweat. Adronite, cadmium, chromium, copper are transformed into hexavalent chromium. Hexavalent chromium moves with the underground waters, tainting them. Undercurrents metabolize it to melons, potatoes, onions, acid on marble fragments, burns. on the skin. The pollution is in part native, in part the result of anthropogenic activities, in part due to the industrial byproducts. In Zogyika's Bacchae, Dionysus revealed, "Thebes taints me with bastardy. I am turned into an alien, some foreign outgrowth of her habitual tyranny." The metabolism of the plain reacts to anything that resists to be contaminated.
Three specific ways to approach Thebes. 1. First, from above. Descending Kithaeron, a legendary mountain range whose domain is divided between kings and shepherds. On Phykion Mountain, a summit that sprouts from a highlands plateau overlooking the city, is where the Sphinx killed herself. No one will ever know her desperation. Do you know what it means to lose an ultimate secret that lives inside you? Others called it a riddle, but for the Sphinx, it was her child. It rose from her inner folds. All the world's suicides are sphinxes. When you wrench from inside them what remains untold, they fall off a cliff and shatter. The ultimate secret of ancient Thebes was Oedipus. Thebes still lives and kills itself from self-made Oedipal complexes, which were never meant in Freudian terms. Complexes of an indigenous and chronic pathology of secrets. That's why the Thebans were never fond of the Athenians, since those wretched people stole their myths and turned them into theater. Postscript from another past era. In Villa, a mountain village above Thebes, all bourgeois Athenians used to go to enjoy the snow when they got tired of excursions to Mount Parnas. But they never descended to Thebes below. To do what down there with such over-repeated, stale myths? 2. The other way to approach Thebes is level. The perspective of the plains, of lines without corners. This can only be mapped by migratory birds and high-tension electrical wires. Always exposed from everywhere, Thebes developed the highest military art, level thought. Armies populate the entire history of Thebes. From Cadmus to Alexander, conquerors operated along the same straight line, coming down from the north, never the reverse, except for the Athenians. Thebes were traversed by Byzantines, Slavs, Arvanites, Turks, and Germans. Tourists, almost never. Really, why would you build a city on such an open plain? Everyone gazes at you without qualms. Everyone covets you and permeates you throughout the centuries. Passing through the walls upon entry, you now see quarries, sewage pipe factories, accessories of agricultural machinery, cotton ginning plants, aluminum refineries, factories of industrial insulation, condensing unit repair shops, phosphoric fertilizer depots. Oops. Hard to do this in one hand. There we go. At one time here, Izola and Petsetakis were kings, industrial divinities that had contempt for both Mount Olympus and their own sense of honor. Now in the ruins of their temples, abandoned factories, pillagers and gravediggers revel in blithe dance. 3. Even if no one can quite stand it, there is a third way, the subterranean approach. Not that anyone opens tunnels, passages to the underworld. The ground under the city is really hard. Nothing sprouts from it. The subterranean passages concern the indigent, those who have lost their way while seeking, or the eternal nomads. The first ones end up in confinement camps. The others remain on the road. Migrants, refugees, and gypsies, equally without resource, foreigners indefinitely, they leave their traces with an underground auditory ringing, black leather shadows that fall naked over the stones. Thebes has always been a passage. Here, millions of indigents lost in aporia were dragged through the mud. Only the stones can be considered native. It makes you wonder.
6 types of dust. There is the dust that presents itself as dislocated soil. Then there is the dust generated as debris from the highways. The dust that comes up from the continuous shifting of the ruins under the city. The dust collected on ventilators and lungs, remnants of unusable cotton. The dust freed from the marble quarry. The dust of the archaeologist. The dust asleep in deposits of stones, awaiting displacement.
Χιόνι και δόντια. Το χιόνι σκέπασε τη θύβα από άκρου εις άκρων, πυκνό και απαλό, σαν χλώμη στάχτη. Σε τέτοιες περιπτώσεις δεν ψάχνεις να βρεις τι εξέχει, τι προβάλλει στον ορίζοντα, πάνω από εκεί που το μάτι πάβει να διακρίνει. Το χιόνι, η στάχτη, εξομοιώνει τις διαστάσεις και απαλύνει το ακάλυπτο σαν πέπλο. Θα μπορούσα να είχα σκάψει πιο βαθιά, να βρω από πού ξεκίναγαν οι φύτρες, αν υπήρχαν. Να βρω τα δόντια τα θαμμένα, αν υπήρχαν. Γιατί οι θεοί, αιώνες τώρα, μας ειδοποίησαν. Το παραμύθι δεν έχει δράκο. Αν βρίσκαμε τα δόντια, θα μπορούσαμε να καμαρώνουμε, ως εγκληματολόγοι, ότι ο μύθος είναι ζωντανός. Ακριβώς επειδή βρήκαμε το πτώμα του, ή τέλος πάντων τα σκόρπια ίχνη του, οστεϊκά πετρώματα ή πεπρωμένα, απολιθωμένα σινιάλα, σαν κυμολίες που άλλοτε σχηματίζουν παραμύθια στο δάπεδο και άλλοτε θρηματίζονται σαν χλωμή σκόνη που λερώνει. Όμως τα δόντια μένουν στερεά. Χιλιάδες χρόνια αργότερα εξακολουθούν να εκπέμπουν. Από θαμμένα δόντια ανακαλύπτουμε κρυμμένες αλήθειες παρελθόντος. Όπως προχθές π.χ. που αποκαλύφθηκε ότι ο Πάμπλο Νερούδα δολοφονήθηκε με δηλητήριο πριν 50 χρόνια. Λες και δεν το ξέραμε βέβαια. Στην ποίηση υπάρχει ήδη η επαλήθευση. Και αυτό ακριβώς είναι το θέμα. Ο μύθος είναι ζωντανός. Τα βήματα είναι τα δόντια. Οι φύτρες είμαστε εμείς. Οι εγκληματολόγοι μυθαμοιβοί. Snow and teeth. The snow concealed Thebes from every side, dense and soft like pale ash. In such cases, you don't look for what stands out, what exceeds the horizon past the point where the eye ceases to distinguish. The snow, the ash, streamlines all dimensions and softens the unconcealed like a veil. I could have dug down deeper to find where the sprouts began, if they existed, to find the buried teeth, if they existed, because centuries now, the gods have spoken. Myth has no dragon. If we found the teeth, we could stand proud, as criminologists, that myth is alive, precisely because we found its corpse, or in any case, its scattered remains, petrified bones or destinies, calcified signals, like chalk that sometimes draws fables on the ground, and other times is shattered to a pale dust that stains. Yet teeth remain solid. Thousands of years later, they continue to emanate. From buried teeth, we discover hidden truths of the past. Like, for example, yesterday, when it was revealed that Pablo Neruda had been murdered by poison 50 years ago. As if surely we didn't know. Verification already lies in the poem. And this is precisely the point. Myth is alive. The teeth are poems. The sprouts are us, the criminologist mythmongers. That's it. Thank you.
So I think now is a good time to ask if there's any questions in the audience. I can ask some questions.
That is your job.
Yeah. So we started with the teeth and we ended with the teeth.
Yes, not planned.
Not planned, but well executed. So I think you've spoken about myth, poetics and myth throughout this talk, and maybe that's a nice thing to return to a little bit. What is it that is so interesting for you, or for both of you, really, in myth?
That it's not a fixing form of thought, that it has an openness to be read into again and again, instead of trying to represent something or fix it to its place. It's something that has the potential of being read otherwise, and I'm always interested in things that can be read otherwise.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We would say also that myth is performative, that is very much embedded in not just, of course, the theater, which is the obvious thing to say, but in the way that we perform in our lives and as societies, and that it is also not archaic, but something that is constantly being created and recreated and changed, and becomes a certain kind of performative sphere where people can encounter each other and meet. Not always in friendly terms either, but nonetheless that the space where, let's say, humans intersect.
And I guess that kind of could lead us to a question of, I guess I'm interested in what kind of the relationship is to, no, how do I ask this? To which extent is this work with Thebes metaphorical? What kind of role does metaphor play in this project, in the overall project, I guess?
Fundamental. No, I mean it is. We just talked about this, but metaphora means metaphor means a movement and a transposition. So there is a movement in terms of the writing, but there is a movement in terms of the forms of production of this work, and there is the movement that is actually interested in terms of the way people move and their relationship to land. So metaphor is a way to speak about something without, again, comes to poetics, without concretizing it or giving it a singular meaning. But then metaphor, in this more open sense, for me, is also how I relate to the work.
So, Thebes is a kind of metaphoric space since antiquity, because the Athenians chose to stage all their drama in Thebes, almost all in Thebes, even though they talked about themselves, and that was the point of their tragedies.
They take place in Thebes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it becomes a kind of already not just a foil, but a kind of mirror or transposed space for them to stage their questions, their concerns, and their self-criticism also. So that's one thing, and it's already a kind of profound metaphorical space. It kind of almost always was, which is very strange. And then the other thing I would say is in light of what I was just reading, or what we've been thinking about really, the notion of the passage. We thought Thebes as passage because it is a place that people pass through. They never stay in its history.
And they don't wish to.
They don't wish to, because it's not that interesting. And yet, but passage is obviously a remarkable term, and it has all kinds of meanings. And a metaphor is a passage. It's a passage of meaning, within meaning. We move through, layers of meaning when we use metaphors, or we inhabit a kind of transitory meaning. You can think of it if we are sitting on, from the standpoint of sitting on the metaphor, as it were. So it works very well. And as Danae said before, and pardon me for repeating in my words, Thebes is not part of the Hellenic ideal. It's what resists the classical ideal, which is of course Athens. And she chose this.
Yeah, that is really important in the choice of Thebes as a place, that it is the other to the ideal city-state of Athens, where any look of European enlightenment is based on, is like looking at Athens as the ideal. So I was interested in what lies outside of it, and what is the other of Athens, which is Thebes. It has been through the myths and theatrical plays, but also in its contemporary history, and even the place it has for contemporary Greeks, I would say, is like a no place. There's nothing there. Every time I would tell people I'm going to Thebes, they'd be like, "Why? What are you doing there?" Like, what? There's so like. It's not a place where tourists go because it's very ugly. There are ancient ruins, but they're not presented for the tourist gaze. To find them, you just have to almost break your car to get to the ancient theater that I've shot in. It just lies there next to the electrical wires, and it's not a point for people to look at.
Yeah, and the contemporary ruins are factories. Because the ruins in Athens are factories from the from mid-50s all the way to the 70s. So abandoned buildings, but contemporary ones. It's a remarkable contrast, really.
And there's a lot of different kinds of ruins in Thebes, and lives that are being ruined in Thebes. Yeah. What was the question?
No, that was it. You did very well.
I don't remember what the question was.
No, I mean, you did the metaphor. There's a question.
Oh, the question.
Anna,
wonderful.
Yeah, I had a question about, that was generated by, I guess, the last, I'm going to protect my voice, the last lines of your last reading, Stathis, which were about verification. I think that specific term kind of struck me. I really like the way you framed it, right? The criminology, etc. And it made me think of this sort of perhaps forensic impulse when engaging with certain myths. And what I'm thinking of specifically here is something that I encountered while I was working and researching in Australia, which is something I think that's been accelerating in recent years, which is the search for, I guess, the truth of specific historic events in certain stories in Aboriginal dreaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this impulse to trace back, like, right, we can actually find the impact of the meteor that fell in this place because it has been described in this dreaming as a way of legitimizing that kind of knowledge, right? And I was wondering if any of either of your work, separate or joint, sort of, I guess, engages with that forensic impulse, or pushes against it more specifically or intensively, or if you're thinking about that in the ways in which, there are attempts to solidify a truth that could legitimize myth. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think it's hard to answer whether. I think that in looking, yesterday I got to see the film again in the big screen downstairs. It was wonderful because I had a new perspective, including the many layers of depth that it has visually, as well as, of course, the sound. But and as I was listening to you ask your question, the last part of your question, I thought, well, there's something forensic in these depths that Danae has managed to capture in film, because the whole point of not just Thebes, of course, this is a history of Greece generally. There's so many layers that are literally not just simply buried, but in a kind of palimpsest way, right? I mean, things are just sitting, and you can read them from either side. So So I don't know, though, having said that, I'm not sure that we are, or maybe I'll speak for myself, but I think that we agree, that we're looking for truth in any way, the way that the forensic work must do. I mean, meaning that whatever traces it unearths, it has to figure out where they lead, right, some sort of point. I'm not sure that's the case, or if that is the case, what the object or whatever that leads is really quite complex and contradictory, and it's not one. By the way, I have to say this is a matter of translation. When I translated this poem, this last thing, I was very pleased with myself when I wrote, sorry, I have to say it, but verification always lies in the poem. With the amazing, wonderful double meaning of the word in English, lies, because of course in the Greek it exists within the poem. But when I came up with this, which just sort of it came out of my head, I thought, oh, that's brilliant, because that is the point, the difficulty of real verification.
And just to be clear, to maybe add to my question, what I did mean is that I do think that forensic impulse is very problematic, right, and something to be criticized. And I just think there is something intriguing and maybe a bit troubling in the impulse to look for this. I mean, again, in the very specific case of the dreaming, for the historical truth that make it as valid as other
Yeah, I guess there's something about, because I felt like in my process of going to Thebes, I was trying to trace certain things, but I wasn't looking for verification. I was just looking for something that I didn't know what it was. So there was something forensic about it, in the sense that a lot of the shots have happened because I was in contact with people who would tell me, oh, that's where Cadmus was, that's where the dragon lied, that's where Europe was raped. That was like, it was literally physically tracing and finding entirely different kinds of histories, but I wasn't looking for proof. So I think that's the difference. There was something forensic about retracing these sayings, because you never know how do you know? Like, there's no way of knowing. And but there was something about the method, I guess, and also like while trying to retrace the myth is how I met this group of migrant workers, and particularly this one migrant worker, Atif, who guided all of my shots and introduced me to the animals that are the main characters in the film, and showed me Thebes. So there was a forensic looking, but not for some clear thing. Yeah.
I think we've almost run out of time. Is there one thing that you'd like to discuss maybe before we end? Is there something that's burning?
No, nothing is burning.
Nothing is burning. Any last questions? No. Then I just want to thank you again for coming here.
Thank you.
And for being with us, and for the wonderful workshop that you had earlier today, which I hear was a great success. And thank you everyone for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.